The spare key was lying on the concrete outside my apartment, sitting on top of a folded note. You dropped your key. 4 words. No name. No smiley face. No reason for me to cross the hall and thank anyone. I knew Megan had written it anyway. A few months earlier, a delivery driver had left one of my cabinet hardware boxes outside her door. She had corrected the apartment number on the label before returning it. Same narrow handwriting. Same habit of doing something helpful without turning it into a conversation. I stood there with my tool bag pulling down one shoulder and 2 folders of customer paperwork pressed against my side. I had spent 10 hours installing cabinets in a kitchen where the floor dropped nearly half an inch from one wall to the other. My back hurt, my hands were dry from sawdust, and all I wanted was food and a shower. Instead, I kept staring at that note. Megan lived directly across the hall. She had lived there for all 7 months I had been in the building, and during those 7 months I had put real effort into not getting to know her. That sounds worse when I say it plainly. The first time I saw her, she was coming home while I was leaving for work. She wore dark blue scrubs and had her hair tied back, though half of it had escaped. She paused with one hand against her doorframe like she needed a second before taking another step. "Morning," I said. She looked up and smiled. "Morning." That was it. Maybe 5 seconds. It was enough to make me careful. 2 years earlier, Amanda had ended our 6-year relationship while we were eating dinner. There had been no big argument and no warning I could point to. She set down her fork and calmly told me she didn't see a future with me anymore. I had been sitting inside that future while she had already left it. After that, I built a smaller life. Work, groceries, television I barely watched, sleep. A life without many plans was harder to lose. Then Megan smiled at me in a concrete hallway, and I felt myself wanting something again. So I avoided her. I nodded when we passed. I held the elevator. I moved aside near the mailboxes. If I heard her door open, sometimes I waited before leaving mine. I knew she worked early shifts and sometimes came home late because we shared a wall and a hallway, not because I was keeping track. I heard the quiet music she played while making dinner. I saw the takeout bag outside her door most Fridays. I knew she helped the older man downstairs carry groceries without making a big deal about it. I noticed all of that while pretending not to notice her. And now she had found my key near the freight elevator, carried it upstairs, and left it where I would see it. She hadn't knocked. She hadn't waited for thanks. Standing there, I finally understood that I wasn't protecting myself from Megan. She had never asked me for anything. I was protecting myself from wanting to know her. The next morning, I left 20 minutes early. I told myself I wanted to beat traffic. The truth was I didn't know what to say about the key. I reached the freight elevator before remembering the folder of customer measurements sitting on my kitchen table. Without it, I would be guessing where to cut 3 filler panels. And guessing is how cabinet installers spend Saturdays fixing mistakes for free. I turned around just as Megan opened her door. She had a canvas work bag over one shoulder. The strap caught on the handle, the bag twisted, and papers slid across the hallway. One stopped against my boot. For half a second, I considered pretending I hadn't seen it. Then I looked down at the page and realized that would make me a ridiculous person. I picked it up and crouched to gather the others. Megan exhaled and pushed loose hair away from her face. I like starting the morning by spreading my entire life across the hallway. At least the building has plenty of floor space. She looked at me, surprised, then laughed. It was the first time I had made her laugh, and it made me forget the sentence I had prepared about the key. We collected the last few pages. I handed them over. "Ryan, right?" she asked. "Yeah, Megan." We've both read the mailboxes successfully. 7 months of advanced research. Her eyes narrowed slightly, like she was deciding whether I had just admitted something. I cleared my throat. "Thanks for returning my key. I found it near the elevator. Leaving it downstairs seemed like a bad plan. You could have knocked. You looked tired when you came home." I was. An unexpected knock might have finished me. She smiled again. Then I made the correct medical decision. That reminded me she worked at a rehabilitation clinic. I knew that from the logo on her jacket, another ordinary fact I had collected without ever asking her directly. She adjusted the bag on her shoulder. "I also know you install cabinets," she said. The boxes gave me away. The boxes, the catalogs, and the cordless drill. "Sorry about the drill." "The drill is fine. Your printer sounds angry. It has personal issues. I can hear that through the wall." The elevator arrived with its usual metal groan. Megan stepped inside and held the gate for me. I should have gone with her. Instead, I pointed toward my apartment. Forgot some measurements. Good luck with the printer. The gate closed between us, but the hallway didn't feel the same afterward. Over the next few weeks, our conversations happened almost by accident. We complained about the heating system, which kept my apartment too warm and hers too cold. We stood in the slow elevator while a neighbor's trumpet practice followed us down 3 floors. Once, a delivery driver switched our dinners, and Megan held up my burger while I held her salad. I think the universe is suggesting lifestyle changes, she said. The universe can mind its own business. I stopped waiting for her to leave before opening my door. Then one evening, she knocked. She stood there holding a plastic container. I made too much chicken soup. How does soup become a personal problem? The container started judging me. I stepped aside and invited her in. She hesitated for just a moment before crossing the doorway. My apartment suddenly looked exactly as empty as it was. Tool catalogs on the table, cabinet samples near the wall, 2 unfinished shelves I had meant to mount for months. Almost nothing that showed a person lived there. Megan looked around. You install kitchens for a living. That's what people keep telling me. But your own shelves aren't finished. I don't bring my best employee home. Repair workers are usually the last people to repair their own lives. That sounded suspiciously personal. She gave me a look. Eat your soup, Ryan. We sat at my small kitchen table. She told me about helping a patient learn to use a walker correctly. I told her about a homeowner who asked for extra drawers after every cabinet had already been installed. Then she noticed one of my sketches. Is that for an older couple? The husband has trouble bending down. She pointed to the lowest cabinet. A pull-out shelf might be easier. He could bring everything forward instead of reaching inside. It was simple, practical, and better than what I had planned. I wrote it beside the drawing. When Megan left, she carried the empty container across the hall and told me my printer needed professional help. A few minutes later, I heard her door close. I sat at the table with the revised sketch in front of me and realized I was already listening for the next time it opened. A few nights later, the heating system decided my apartment needed to feel like July. I opened both windows, turned the thermostat down, and waited. Nothing changed. The exposed pipes along the brick wall kept clicking like they were proud of themselves. There was a narrow service balcony at the end of our hallway. It had once been used by factory workers, according to the building manager, though he said that about almost everything. I grabbed my jacket and went out there for some air. Megan was already sitting on the old metal bench with a mug in both hands. She looked over. Let me guess. Too warm? 80 degrees. My place is freezing. So the building has enough heat. It just hates you. And likes you too much. I sat at the other end of the bench. Cold air came through the gaps in the brick railing, but it felt good after my apartment. For a while, we talked about ordinary things. Her clinic had changed its scheduling system, and nobody understood it. A customer had called my company because one cabinet door looked darker at sunset than it did in the morning. Megan said I should tell him the sun was outside my warranty. Then we stopped talking. Normally, silence with another person made me feel responsible. I would search for a question or make some useless comment about the weather. With Megan, I didn't feel like I had to fix it. She looked out toward the lights beyond the factory windows. Have you always been this quiet? She asked. Mostly these days. She nodded slowly. She understood there was more behind the answer, but she didn't push. Her phone vibrated against the bench. She looked at the screen, and the change in her face was immediate. Her shoulders tightened. She turned the phone over and set it beside her. Everything all right? I asked. Work. She answered too quickly. I knew it wasn't work, but I also knew what it felt like when someone asked a question that was really a request for access. So I left it alone. A few minutes later, Megan stood and picked up her mug. At the door, she paused. Thanks for not asking twice. Then she went inside. 2 nights after that, I was working on paperwork when I heard the stairwell door open. It stayed open. That was unusual because the heavy door normally slammed hard enough to shake the wall. I stepped into the hallway and looked down the stairs. Megan was sitting on the landing 1 floor below. She still had her clinic clothes on. Her work bag rested beside her, and her head leaned back against the wall. She wasn't upset in any obvious way. She just looked completely used up. I walked down and sat across from her. I didn't ask what happened. We stayed there for several minutes, listening to the old pipes and the elevator moving somewhere above us. Finally, she looked at me. You're good at not making people explain. I've needed that before. She studied my face, then nodded. Thank you. That was all she said. A minute later, she stood, picked up her bag, and went back upstairs. I followed a little later so it wouldn't feel like I was watching her. 2 evenings passed before she knocked on my door. This time, she wasn't holding soup or a package. She wore loose pants and a gray clinic sweatshirt. Her hair was down, and she looked uncertain. Can I come in? Yeah. I had heard her door earlier, so I had already started heating water. I took the peppermint tea from the cabinet. She noticed. You remembered. You said it helps after late shifts. That was weeks ago. I remember useful information. She sat at the table while I poured the water. Cabinet sketches were spread across one side, including a kitchen in an older house near Lakewood. Megan pulled one drawing closer. Have you ever built something around a space that stayed empty? I glanced at the sketch. You mean like an appliance opening? No. Her voice had changed. She wrapped both hands around the mug. I mean building your life around someone who isn't there anymore. I sat across from her and waited. She told me she had been engaged several years earlier. His name was Brandon. They had been together almost 5 years, and everybody liked him. Her family liked him. Her coworkers liked him. He could walk into a room and make people feel like they had known him for years. Megan thought they were planning the same future. They weren't. Brandon had another serious relationship in a different city. Not one bad choice. Not one confused weekend. He had 2 separate lives with separate plans and separate promises. Megan looked down at her tea. The worst part was that I didn't see it. She explained that her job depended on noticing small things. She could tell when a patient was hiding discomfort or shifting their weight to avoid a weak leg. She noticed fear before someone admitted they were afraid. But she hadn't noticed the biggest lie in her own life. Afterward, she stopped trusting her judgment. Any kind gesture could have another reason behind it. Any confident person could be hiding something. Even feeling safe became suspicious. I could have told her it wasn't her fault. That Brandon had simply been good at lying. Both things were probably true. But I knew how empty automatic answers could sound. That's a hard thing to carry into every new room, I said. Megan looked at me for a long moment. Yeah, it is. She stayed for nearly 3 hours. After telling me the main part, she didn't seem interested in discussing every detail. We went back to the kitchen drawing. She suggested replacing a lower cabinet with a wide pull-out shelf for the homeowner, who had trouble reaching. I added it to the plan. After that night, she started coming over without excuses. I kept peppermint tea in the cabinet. She looked at layouts and pointed out problems I wouldn't have considered. I fixed a loose shelf in her apartment and adjusted a closet door that kept catching. She brought dinner and sorted screws into labeled containers while I worked. One evening, she fell asleep on my couch during a documentary. I covered her with a blanket and went back to my paperwork. When she woke an hour later, she looked confused for a second, then relaxed when she saw me at the table. Neither of us called what was happening a relationship. Naming it felt like putting weight on something that was still learning how to stand. Then, one Saturday afternoon, I came back from the hardware store and saw Megan near the mailboxes with a man I had never met. He was dressed neatly and standing too close. Megan's arms were folded. I told you not to come here, she said. He smiled like she had said something harmless. I was worried about you. Megan glanced toward the entrance, and for the first time since I had known her, she didn't look tired or guarded. She looked trapped inside an older version of herself. The man near the mailboxes turned when he heard me come in. He looked around my age, maybe a little younger. Clean jacket, expensive shoes, easy smile. The kind of person who knew how to appear reasonable before anyone had decided whether he was. Megan stood with her back, close to the brick wall. I said I'm fine, she told him. I know, he said. I just wanted to see that for myself. That isn't your decision. He gave a soft laugh, like she was overreacting to something kind. I set the hardware store bag on the floor. Everything okay? I asked Megan, not him. Her eyes moved to me. For a second, she looked relieved. Then her expression closed again. Yes. The answer meant the conversation was over. I understood that. The man didn't. So this is him, he asked. Megan's jaw tightened. Kyle, leave. Kyle looked at me with mild interest. The neighbor? I didn't answer. He glanced between us. She's mentioned you. Megan's face changed. Not embarrassment. Anger. I have not discussed Ryan with you. You didn't have to. You stopped answering everyone right around the time you started spending evenings across the hall. Kyle said it casually, but the words were placed carefully. He wanted me to wonder. He wanted Megan to feel watched. She stepped away from the wall. You shouldn't be in my building. We worked together for 3 years. That doesn't give you permission. I was checking on someone I care about. You were told not to. His smile stayed in place, but his eyes didn't match it anymore. I wanted to tell him to go. I wanted to make myself useful by taking control of the situation. Instead, I looked at Megan. Do you want me to call the building manager? Kyle gave a short laugh. Seriously? Megan didn't look at him. No, she said. I want him to leave. That was clear enough. Kyle picked up his car keys from the mailbox ledge. All right. I was trying to help. Megan said nothing. He walked toward the entrance, then looked back at me. Good luck. The door closed behind him. For a moment, neither of us moved. I can walk upstairs with you, I said. Her apartment was maybe 20 feet away. I'm fine. This time, the words were not information. They were a boundary. Okay. She picked up her mail and went upstairs without waiting for me. I carried my bag to the elevator and stood there longer than necessary. Over the next 3 days, Megan disappeared without actually going anywhere. I heard her leave early for work. I heard her come home. Her door closed quickly each time. The quiet music she usually played in the evening stopped. I sent one message. Hope your shift was okay. She answered almost 5 hours later. Long day. Going to sleep. Normally, she would have added something dry about a patient refusing exercises or the clinic's broken coffee machine. This time, there was nothing. I started knocking on her door twice. Both times, I stopped before my hand touched it. Concern could become pressure faster than people admitted, especially when the concerned person wanted an answer that would make him feel better. On the third evening, I left a box of peppermint tea outside her apartment with a note. No need to answer. I heard her door open about 20 minutes later. The next morning, the tea was gone. She still didn't come over. I told myself I was respecting her space. That was true. I was also hurt, and pretending otherwise would have been dishonest. For weeks, Megan had been sitting at my table, correcting my cabinet plans and complaining about my printer. She had fallen asleep on my couch. She had trusted me with a part of her past that she clearly didn't share easily. Then Kyle appeared, and suddenly I was outside the door again. The difference was that I didn't believe she was punishing me. Kyle had reminded her of a version of herself she had worked hard to leave behind. Pulling away probably felt familiar. Familiar could feel safe even when it wasn't good. So I went to work. I installed cabinets. I fixed a pantry door that scraped the floor. I replaced 3 hinges because a customer had ordered the wrong finish. I came home and left my door closed. On the 4th night, someone knocked shortly after midnight. I opened the door. Megan stood there barefoot in a sweatshirt and loose pants. Her hair was tied badly, like she had done it without looking in a mirror. Can I come in? I stepped aside. She went straight to the kitchen table, but didn't sit. I stayed near the counter, giving her room. I almost called Kyle tonight, she said. I kept my face still. Not because I want him back. Okay. I don't. She looked at me. I need you to understand that. I do. She sat down and pressed both hands against the edge of the table. When he showed up, it felt like I had gone backward. He knew me right after everything with Brandon. I was confused all the time. I didn't trust my own decisions. Kyle liked being the person I needed. She stared at the floor. When I started doing better, he didn't like me as much. I pulled out the chair across from her. He sent messages after you ended it? Yes. Always framed like concern. Asking whether I was eating, whether I was sleeping, whether I was making good choices. That doesn't sound like concern. No. It sounds like permission I never asked him to give. She finally looked up. For a few minutes tonight, calling him felt easier than sitting here wondering what happens with you. I didn't speak. Sometimes the old bad thing feels safer than the new good thing because at least you already know how it hurts. The sentence stayed between us. I understood it immediately. I had spent 2 years living inside a smaller version of my life because disappointment I could predict felt easier than hope I couldn't control. Megan leaned back. Why did you avoid me for 7 months? There was no useful lie left. The first morning I saw you, you smiled at me. She blinked. That's your reason? It made me feel something before I was ready. She waited. I told her about Amanda. About the 6 years. About the ordinary dinner. About how she had calmly said she no longer saw a future with me while I was still imagining one. I didn't know she was leaving until she had already decided, I said. After that, I started thinking a smaller life would be safer. Was it? No. It only made me quiet. Megan's eyes dropped to the table. What changed? You returned my key. Her head lifted. The note. 4 words. No knock. No need for thanks. It was exactly how you are. Kind without making it a debt. She looked almost uncomfortable hearing that. I thought you'd lose the key. I almost lost something else by avoiding you. She was silent for several seconds. Then she stood and came around the table. I noticed you too, she said. You don't push when I say I need space. You remember small things. You stay calm without trying to manage me. She stopped close enough that I could feel the warmth from her. I kept waiting for that to change. My voice came out lower than I expected. Has it? No. She raised one hand, paused, then placed her palm against my chest. I don't want fear making every decision for me. Then let this one be yours. She kissed me. It was quiet and careful, like neither of us wanted to turn it into something the other person hadn't agreed to. I kissed her back and waited. She stayed close. When she rested her forehead against mine, I didn't say anything clever. I just put my arms around her, and she let me. A few minutes later, we sat on the couch. Megan blocked Kyle's number herself. I didn't tell her to do it. I didn't ask to see the screen. My hands are shaking, she said. A boundary can still be right before it feels comfortable. She leaned against my shoulder. We talked until her words slowed and her breathing became steady. Her mug sat on my table. Her bare feet were tucked under the blanket. One hand rested beside mine. For the first time since I moved into that apartment, the quiet didn't feel empty. We didn't wake up the next morning as two completely different people. Megan went across the hall to shower before work. I made coffee, found one of her hair ties under the couch, and spent 10 minutes wondering whether returning it immediately would seem normal or overly organized. That evening, we went to a neighborhood diner. It was our first actual date, though neither of us used the word until Megan looked at the 2 menus and said, "So are we calling this dinner, or are we still pretending to be neighbors who accidentally share every evening?" I thought the menus made it official. Very romantic. We took things slowly after that. There were planned dinners instead of vague hallway invitations. We walked near Lake Erie on cold afternoons, usually turning back when the wind became too much. I picked her up after late clinic shifts when the buses were running slowly. She came with me to choose cabinet hardware once and rejected 3-drawer pulls because they were difficult to grip. Months passed through ordinary decisions. We also had problems. One evening, I came home from a difficult installation and barely spoke. The homeowner had changed measurements twice, blamed our crew for the delay, and kept following me from room to room. Megan was sitting at my table with her blue mug. I answered her questions with 1 or 2 words. After 10 minutes, she set the mug down. "Do you need space, or are you leaving the conversation?" I looked at her. She wasn't accusing me. She was asking directly because silence had meant something different in her past. "I need about 20 minutes, I said. "I'm not leaving." "Okay." She went across the hall and came back 20 minutes later with takeout. Another time, I told her I would meet her after work at 7. A delivery arrived late at the job, and I didn't call until 7:15. When I finally reached her, she was quiet. "I should have called sooner," I said. "Yes." I lost track of time. She looked at me carefully. That explanation is probably true. My head is still trying to turn it into something else. Which part belongs to right now? You were late and didn't call. And which part doesn't? That people who care about me always have a second story. I nodded. The first part is mine. I'm sorry. That became the pattern. We didn't pretend fear had disappeared. We stopped letting it speak without being questioned. Several months after we started dating, we exchanged keys. We stood in the hallway between our 2 doors. Megan held mine in her palm while I held hers. "This isn't permission to walk in whenever you want," she said. "I know. If the door is closed and you're uncertain, knock." "I will." I looked down at the key she had given me. "For me, this isn't only for emergencies. What is it for?" "Access to my daily life. The boring parts too." Megan smiled. "Especially the boring parts." For almost a year, we kept both apartments. Her things slowly crossed the hallway. Her blue mug stayed in my cabinet. Her running shoes appeared beside my work boots. Books collected near the couch. A clinic jacket hung from the back of one of my chairs. My coffee ended up in her kitchen. So did an extra shirt, a pair of work gloves, and enough tools to fix almost anything in her apartment. Most nights, one of us crossed the hallway before bed. We never treated living together as something that would simply happen because it was convenient. Then the building manager slipped a lease renewal notice under Megan's door. She carried it into my apartment and placed it on the table. I have 30 days to answer. I sat across from her. I want you to move in here. Megan studied my face. Because I'm already here most nights? That's part of it. But I want more than 2 apartments pretending to be one. I told her I wanted the early clinic mornings, the dusty work clothes, shared groceries, quiet evenings, difficult weeks, and normal dinners. I wanted a home we had chosen instead of 2 separate rooms we were afraid to give up. She looked around my apartment. I need somewhere that is mine. A room, a small workspace, a door I can close without it meaning anything is wrong. We can use the back corner near the windows. I'll build shelves. You've been promising to finish your own shelves since I met you. This time I'll have supervision. She laughed, then reached across the table and took my hand. I want to live here too. We planned the move. That mattered to both of us. We used my work van, 2 borrowed moving carts, and the freight elevator, which became even slower when loaded with boxes. 2 neighbors helped carry books and clinic supplies. On the last trip, Megan stepped into the elevator holding her blue mug in both hands. You know I own packing material, I said. I saw how you packed the bowls. I install cabinets professionally. That does not qualify you to protect ceramic objects. A few weeks later, I came home from work and found her making tea in the kitchen. Her shoes were near the door. Her clinic jacket hung beside my work coat. There were photographs on the brick wall, a softer lamp near the couch, and 2 chairs at the table that were actually used. A friend from the clinic had just finished visiting. As she put on her coat, Megan said, Ryan ignored me for 7 months. I was recovering. You were hiding. Both can be true. After her friend left, Megan placed a mug in front of me. I looked toward the small wooden hook beside the door. My spare key rested there beside hers. The key she had once returned without asking for anything had become an ordinary part of our shared home. Megan gave me the same tired, genuine smile she had given me that first morning in the hallway. This time, I didn't look away. You were the best door I almost never opened. She stared at me. That is a terrible cabinet installer line. It worked. She leaned down and kissed me.